Every league in Path of Exile, I try to make a tanky wand-based character that won't fall over at a stiff breeze, and is able to farm most content in the game without spending an insane amount of money. You might have played some of my wand builds in the past, and this one is pretty much no different, except that we are using Kinetic Fusillade now. Kinetic Fusillade is an interesting skill, because it's one of the few skills in the game that rewards you scaling an insane amount of reduced duration. Now, there are upsides and downsides to this, some of the upsides being that you can use Lightning Warp, which is one of the best feeling movement skills in the game when you do have a lot of reduced duration. However, skills like Sigil of Power or Immortal Call, which are typically staples on a build like this, simply don't function because of all that reduced duration. Another interesting thing about this skill is that it has a ton of chains built into it from the get-go. That means there's no need for Pierce or Fork or anything like that. And because of those chains, and the way that there is a AoE explosion for every enemy hit, we're able to abuse Tornado on Spellslinger just like most of my other wand builds. A great effect, increasing our damage by about 2 times on most single target. Now, you might be asking, why Champion? One big issue on wand builds is that they really do struggle for accuracy, especially if you're not running some kind of like int stacker version of the build. So with the Worthy Foe node, pretty much completely solves all of our accuracy issues, because once we hit once, we can hit infinitely every single time afterwards. Another more obvious thing is that it's just a tankier ascendancy than most others that are available, due to the easy access of Adrenaline and Fortify. And lastly, on this setup, we're going to be using an Animate Guardian, mostly because of the new companionship support. With the setup that I've got going on this build, my Animate Guardian, after a little while of being in the map, is essentially immortal, meaning that it can take as much damage as it wants, and it pretty much won't ever die. And this is because of the new transfusion support. This gem provides souls, as in the Soul Eater mod, to any minions that you have nearby for every 200 life you spend on upfront skills. So if you're anywhat familiar with champion builds, you'll know that they typically use a Corrupting Fever linked with Life Tap to be able to proc Adrenaline. And since this build scales close to 5,000 health, we can set it to be doing half of our health every single time, which gives a ton of Soul Eater stacks to our Guardian. Once we've used this a couple times in map, they're essentially immortal for the rest of the map, especially because of the gloves that we're putting on this Animate Guardian that'll make it anytime it hits a rare or unique, it is refreshing its stacks of Soul Eater. One other setup that I'm utilizing on this build that you might have seen on some other builds this league is the Screams of the Desiccated Belt with the Diamond Shrine buff. When you combine this with Marlene's Fallacy, you are able to get an insane amount of crit multi with essentially no downside besides the standard downside of the belt. Now typically when you see people using the Screams of the Desiccated Belt, they're using things like Gull or Blunderbore and stuff like that. However, Diamond Shrine essentially just says you crit. It doesn't really scale in any meaningful way, so we don't have to use those extra items to really get the full benefit of the belt. And also included in this guide is going to be a speed leveling setup that loosely follows Jungrone's KF wand leveling tech. It's got a full step-by-step POB of its own, and it took me roughly 8 hours to go from beach all the way to level 95 in maps. Now, keep in mind this may take a little bit longer in case you are a slower player or not as experienced as I am, but it is still significantly faster than almost anything else leveling-wise that I have ever played. And a little bit later in this video, I'm going to be going in depth on some of the currency strategies that I used on this build to farm a couple hundred divine that I'm going to invest in a higher version of this build that'll be updated in the Mobalytics guide down in the description in a few days. Because realistically in Path of Exile, money is power, and you really do get what you pay for. But sometimes you don't actually get what you pay for. If you weren't aware, Netflix in general does limit the amount of shows and movies that you can actually watch depending on where you live. There are a ton of series that maybe are available in Europe that aren't available in the United States. And that's where the sponsor of this video, Private Internet Access, comes in. Trying to use a streaming service without a VPN is like buying the full edition of a game and then being told that there's 30 DLCs that you have to purchase at the same time. It just doesn't make sense. What a VPN does, in simple terms, is that you connect to their service, and then they route you to the places that you're trying to get through their private connection. This is what I use Private Internet Access for as a content creator, is trying to protect myself from people being able to find me. Private Internet Access works on every single operating system that you most likely have access to, anything from Windows, iOS, Android, even Linux. It is very simple to use. You load up the program, choose where you'd like to connect from, and hit go. It's essentially all that you have to do. With Private Internet Access, there's a 30-day money guarantee. If you don't like the service or it doesn't end up doing what you want, you can always refund it. And if you use my code down in the description right now, you can get 83% off of your order as well as 4 extra months for free. So if you want to make sure that you're getting everything that you pay for, once again, check out the link in the description, and thank you again to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video. So I do want to quickly go over some of the basics of this build before we get into more of the currency strategies. I'll show you like an example of each of the currency strategy maps so you can see how it goes. But in the meantime, I do want to talk about this main skill first, which is Kinetic Fusillade. It is a little bit of a weird skill. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to turn off our spell slinger so you can see how this functions. So essentially you right click and you shoot a whole bunch of projectiles. Whenever you're hitting an enemy, if we go to basically any part of the campaign, these projectiles, when they do hit an enemy, will chain around and do a whole bunch of AoE. As you can see, they go all over the place, right? The thing is that this is not the normal, like, mechanism of how this mechanic works. As you see, we're firing forward every time we click. If we hold right click, we fire a whole bunch, right? Now, this is because I have scaled an insane amount of reduced skill effect, and without getting super complicated with it, realistically, if you mouse over your skill and you look down here at the right and it says duration is 0.1, as long as that is a decent amount shorter than the duration of your attack time, which you can see up in the top right, you will be perfectly fine. So to show you this, the way that the skill normally works, we'll take off time clasp, we will refund a couple of points here, 2 should be fine. And then when I right click, you'll notice that nothing is happening, right? This is how this skill normally functions, is you hold right click or you press right click and it charges up these little projectiles around your character, and then when you release, they fire. However, since we have scaled so much less duration, this allows us to just fire them automatically. This is that kind of machine gun effect you might have seen some people talk about. Notably, this does cause some issues. Things like cast when damage taken Immortal Call doesn't work. Things like Sigil of Power doesn't work. Things that are duration-based skills where you want longer duration, including something like Convocation, these things don't function as well. However, there is one major upside, and that is we can use Lightning Warp as our movement skill. I would say Lightning Warp is probably the best movement skill in the game if you are scaling less duration. It is extremely fast. It doesn't have any of those like limitations of jumping over gaps. It has full distance that it can jump, kind of like Blink Arrow does. Extremely powerful skill, and you can move around maps very fast with it, and it feels very good in bosses. You can kind of use it while attacking because it is a spell while you're attacking and it's so fast, it doesn't interrupt you very much. So excellent movement skill. And that's pretty much it with Kinetic Fusillade. There's not really a bunch else to talk about there. However, we do need to address the elephant in the room, and that's Bob here. So this is our Animate Guardian, and we use him for a few different things. The main thing that we are using Bob for is going to be this companionship support here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out, and you'll see here the line that says minions from supported skills take 15% of hit damage from their life before you if they are your only minion. Bob is currently our only minion. It gives them a bunch of more life, increased life, and all that kind of other stuff. We are also using a level 1 minion life here, and we're using Meat Shield just to make him as tanky as possible, because if he is taking 15% of our hit damage, probably means he's going to take a lot of damage, right? Well, not exactly. So there is this new mechanic that has been introduced this league, and that's called transfusion support. You'll notice it says a nearby minion gains a soul for every 200 life you spend on upfront costs with supported spells. So it just so happens that we are a champion, and champions have a specific node on their tree that says first to strike, last to fall. Gain adrenaline for 20 seconds when you reach low life. It's pretty common on champions to use a corrupting fever linked with life tap to use about half of your life total. And you might notice that when we use this half of our life total, Bob gets a little bit bigger. And if we keep using it, Bob gets even bigger, right? And he's beating up some of the wormies right now. So every time we use this, Bob is getting like 12 souls or so. And it just so happens that on non-player entities, additional souls gives DR to things like Bob. So that means that he's getting damage reduction. He's getting a lot of damage reduction. Now, on top of this, he is also using some specific gear, which I'll talk about in a moment, but I do have this transfusion linked to Corrupting Fever, which does have that supported by level 1 life tap, and then also my Sniper's mark on hit. So you'll notice that Bob is smaller now. If you were paying attention, you'll see that he slowly lost size over time. That's because Soul Eater stacks will slowly deplete if they're not replenished. So during the middle of the map, anytime that I'm doing a mark on hit with Sniper's Mark, it is just saying, anytime that you spend life on upfront costs with supported spells. It doesn't say cast, it doesn't say use, it just says whenever you spend life. So my Sniper's Mark costs about 311 life every time I apply it, meaning it's going to pop that. However, if we jump over here into POB, you'll also notice that he is using the Soul Ascension gloves, and these particular gloves say eat a soul when you hit a rare or unique enemy no more than once every 0.5 seconds. So Soul Eater gives a bunch of attack speed, and when we get into a map and there's any kind of rares or uniques nearby, Bob's going to be punching them a ton. He really is. So between these couple of things, we're able to pretty much keep max Soul Eater stacks on Bob, which gives him a ton of damage reduction, meaning that all that damage that he's taking from us essentially is nothing. Now, talking a little bit about the other gear here, it's essentially as much stuff as we can to give us benefit while keeping Bob alive. So talking about keeping Bob alive first, we're going to be using Advancing Fortress. This is just for the block chance. It's just a good amount of block chance on a weapon, and it allows him to hit pretty quickly. 45 life per hit, doesn't really do anything. But the reason we want him to block is, one, because it reduces damage that he takes from attacks, but two, because of this recover life when you block modifier here. This shield, I've included notes on how to craft it. It's not as insane as it might seem. The life, the Elirez, the avoid, the block spell, none of that is needed. I just happened to... Okay, so I crafted this with Alteration Orbs, Regal Orbs, and Exalted Orbs, and if you know anything about Path of Exile, like straight Chris Wilson type crafting, and it landed on this. Anyways, you don't need all that other stuff, but you're just going for block chance and recover life when you block, so Bob has pretty close to max block, and whenever he does block, he gains 5% of his life, helps keep his life total up. Other than that, we're using Ralakesh's Impatience. The main reason we're using this is because of the Corrupted Blood cannot be inflicted on you mod. If you've ever played Minions, and you've ever tried to fight like Cirrus, or got into a map with, you know, all the blue mobs have Corrupted Blood, you know how awful this is. You know how it just instantly pops them as soon as that Corrupted Blood gets on there. He's immune to it, doesn't have to worry about it. I don't even know if the maximum number endurance charges thing works on here. It probably does, but that's cool if it does. Gives him some PDR. And then everything else on Bob is realistically going to be for us. So the first one is going to be this Hrimnor's Resolve. This is only for the line that says nearby enemies have Malediction. Malediction is enemies deal 10% less damage and enemies take 10% more damage. This modifier is from another helmet that drops off of the Ultimatum boss. You can corrupt that helmet into these special implicits, and then you can corrupt it into a different helmet. It's just like special outcomes that that particular helmet has. You can get any helmet that says nearby enemies have Malediction as long as it doesn't reduce Bob's stats. This is expensive, it's not necessary, but it's very good. The next thing we're going to talk about here is Garb of the Ephemeral. So the reason that I use this is because of two lines. It says nearby allies' action speed cannot be modified to below base value. If you're not aware, there are a ton of action speed slows in this game, and they feel awful to play with. This negates all of them. You don't have to worry about them anymore. And then nearby enemies cannot deal critical strikes. This makes it so that you're essentially crit immune. Anything that's nearby is not going to be able to crit you. If something is way, way off screen, it can still crit you. Very unlikely. Can happen, but very unlikely. We play softcore, so it doesn't really matter. And then I do want to say that this particular setup with Garb of the Ephemeral does make it so that Bob has trouble surviving until you get those Soul Eater stacks going. If you just want Bob to be absolutely pretty much immune to damage, you never have to worry about anything that happens to this guy, you can swap to Doppelganger, guys. You lose action speed immunity, you lose crit immunity, but Bob's not going to die. He's going to get 10% of his life over 1 second every single time he's hit. He's going to take 35% less physical, 35% chaos damage. He's going to be extremely tanky with this. However, you are going to have to change your major god from Lunaris to Solaris. This isn't a huge deal, but this will at least still make you mostly crit immune. It's an okay god power as well. Not as good as Lunaris in my opinion, but it is what it is. So that's most everything having to do with Bob. I will mention the Convocation setup that I've got here. He does need some kind of life regen, and Convocation does provide that. However, you'll notice that Convocation has a very short duration, 2 seconds, and we are scaling a lot of less duration on this build. So we have Convocation with automation and with more duration support, and this is also qualityed up. This automation gem is qualityed up as well. This makes it so that he doesn't die early on. I'll show you when we jump into the maps here in just a moment what happens with Bob, But for the most part, this will keep him alive. Now, the next section here is going to be currency strategies. The first one that we're going to talk about is going to be boss rushing. Now, I personally, on my version of the build with my level of skills, am able to do boss rushing without using these two scarabs. So the whole idea here with boss rushing is that we are simply just going to be going to Abomination. We're going to be popping this map in, and we are rushing towards the boss, ignoring absolutely everything else, killing the boss, getting the fragments from the boss, leaving and doing another one. That's how this works. Now, there are some builds and some characters that struggle with these bosses, and that's where you can use a Scarab of the Sinistral and a Scarab of the Dextral to just absolutely remove all modifiers. However, this removes the item quantity mod that you see at the top. It also removes all the rarity, pack size, more maps, more scale. It removes all of that. The idea here is that if you can run these without the scarabs, you should. Some people aren't able to. So if you need to use the scarabs, use them. Otherwise, you can make a decent amount more money just by running them as is. I also kind of want to show you what happens with Bob here at the start of one of these maps. So at the start of the map, Bob is not as tanky as he normally would be. You'll see he's taking some damage, right? So the idea here is that anytime that you're entering a map, you just want to hit your Corrupting Fever a whole bunch of times, piano your flash just to get Bob's Soul Eater stacks going. Once Bob has his Soul Eater stacks, you're pretty much fine to just let him do his thing. He's not really gonna die. I refresh them every once in a while just to be safe because, you know, I've kind of gotten into a habit of it. This build is tanky enough to where you don't really need to worry about hitting Corrupting Fever every once in a while. You also do want to refresh this adrenaline buff every 20 seconds, so it's good to get in the habit to just press it occasionally. So we're gonna come up to the boss here. I'll go ahead and hit adrenaline again. So I personally kill Shavron first just because she can be a huge pain. I'm gonna wait here just because if you don't kill her first, she does get pretty dangerous on some maps. Then you can just kill whoever. It doesn't really matter here. But you'll notice that I'm taking a pretty big amount of damage and Bob is pretty much completely fine because he's got a ton of DR. Then we're just gonna try to avoid things as we can. Oh, Screaming Invitation, interesting. Anyways, that's not what we're killing this boss for. We are just killing them for the fragments here, these reality fragments. Now, this boss can also drop like one of the worst fragments in the game, but this is a fast boss. You can clear through the map really quickly, super consistent, and these reality fragments are 164 chaos each. These maps cost maybe, I don't know, 40 or 50 C each every time you go in, and you're almost guaranteed to make about 100 chaos every time you do this, if not more, on average. Then you just jump out, and that's pretty much it. So that is map, like, boss rushing. That's the entire thing that you do with this. You can make an absolutely, like, insane amount of currency, a ridiculous amount of currency doing this strategy. Super easy, super straightforward. Now, as for the tree that you use on Abomination, honestly, it really doesn't matter. If we look at my tree, I was just using my essence tree there. The only thing that you really care about when it comes to those maps, if you are running them with mods, is that you have as much map effect as possible so that you get more quantity. You're just running all of these map effect nodes, all of these here, all the ones in the middle, everything that gives you map effect, that's what you care about. You can run any of these other trees, like I could use my essence tree, I could use my breach tree, I could use my harvest tree. All of these go for map effect mods. Map effect mods are pretty important in Path of Exile when it comes to like high level farming. You should just kind of expect that pretty much all of these are going to use it. Doesn't matter the tree that you use. Now, the next strategy that we're going to be doing is going to be essences. So this is going to be a particular tree. It is important where in this essence tree, once again, I've linked all of this in the written guide over on Mobalytics. You're just taking all of the essence nodes except this one. This crystal resonance node is actually really bad. I've tested this and it essentially just says you get less essences, you get worse essences. That's all that this node does. You can set up some weird setups where you can get like some crazy stuff going here. For this strategy, completely ignore it. It's awful. Realistically, all we care about here are all of the essence nodes besides crystal resonance, as well as all of the map effect nodes. As for our scarabs and the maps that we're running, the thing that I do is a little bit different than the typical strategy has been for quite some time, and that's I blue roll my maps with increased number of rare monsters, and then I use this Scarab of the Sinistral. This makes it so that you get 100% increased effect of area prefix modifiers, but no suffix modifiers. So the increased rare monsters is a prefix. Other than that, we're using Ascent because we want the essences to be higher tier. We're using Scarab of Stability. This makes it so that you can always corrupt essences every single time, and you should be bringing about 2 stacks of Vol Orbs with you every single time you go in. We're using Calcification. This is the main way that you make money off of essences. That Scarab of the Sinistral that I talked about, and then Scarab of Adversaries. If you're not using Scarab of the Sinistral, the old strategy was just 2 of these adversaries. So we're going to go ahead and go in. We will go to Underground Sea, ignore the Astrolabe. You don't need any Astrolabe for this. It's not really relevant. You can do pretty much any of these that you want. You could do none. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to run Searing Exarch for this one because that's just what's on the Atlas tree, and we're going to be going into Underground Sea. Now, one thing I will say is that essences in general are pretty profitable, but it can get a little boring. The basic strategy of how to do essences is that anything that has 5 or more essences, or it has some of these purple essences on them, you're always going to use a Vol Orb because you'll get these powerful high-end essences that are worth a ton. This is essentially just a single target check. You don't really need to worry too much about clear, which this build is good at. If there are 5 or more essences, you'll hit a Vol Orb because the chance of getting either better essences or higher level essences is pretty good, and it ends up being worth it. Anything that's less, I just click. I don't worry about it. Not worth spending a Vol Orb or time even thinking about it. So you just go through here, you click the essence, you hold right click, you pick up your loot, and you just kind of like blast through here like this. You're not really thinking too much. Doesn't matter much beyond just picking up loot, right? You can kill the boss if you want to. It really doesn't matter. Sometimes there are essence mobs in here. The boss will die essentially instantly with how much damage this build does. So we'll go ahead and kill it. That'll give you some progress if you want to spend 30 seconds going in there to like some extra stuff like the Screaming Invitation, which is worth a decent amount, that kind of thing. So we'll go ahead and corrupt this one. You saw it gave us a bunch of Screaming and Shrieking. I think I hear a free Barya somewhere. Where's he at? There he is. Free like 600-700 chaos. Nice. When you do come up to the Mirage, doesn't really matter what you choose here. I personally just choose things that add either extra packs, or if you get something that like is beneficial for the build, be careful about attack speed. That will mess up the build. Like, you don't want Echoing Shrine on this. That will completely nerf your damage. But nothing really changes in here. It's kind of just the same essences. If you see one of the new big essences, notably, it doesn't seem to change when you corrupt it. I've never seen it change, at least. Do be careful, though. Whenever you swap into a new zone, Bob does lose his Soul Eater stack, so you're going to need to replenish them. But the Mirage is just the same as a normal map. You just jump around, you grab all the essences, you do what you gotta do. That's pretty much it for this strategy. There's not much else to talk about. As a final note with selling your essences, one thing I would say is that double check the prices of the lowest essence versus the highest essence when it comes to those top tier essences. So I'll explain. If we go into essences here, there is a big price difference between, say, like Hysteria and Horror or something like that, right? Like, let's actually check the prices on these essences. So if we go to Hysteria and we check Chaos, 21 for an essence of Hysteria, right? And then we go to essences and we check, is it Horror? 36 for Horror. Horror are worth a ton more, right? Like, so this particular one is worth a ton more. If the difference between them is high enough, you can take these essences, like say this stack here, you can go to the station here, pop these in, type in essence, and you can reroll these until you get Horror essences, right? As long as the cost of the juice is way less than what you would be making on average of spending 4 times that, because you have 4 options that it could change into, it's worth it to re-roll those big essences. As for re-rolling the smaller essences, I mean, you could, but the difference in cost is probably not going to be enough. Like, there are some essences, like Scorn, I think, is worth a ton right now, that you could change some of those super low essences into. Honestly, I don't really feel like it's worth your time, but, you know, do what you want to do. Now, for the last strategy is going to be Harvest. This is going to be on Jungle Valley, and the reason for Jungle Valley is because we really care about altars here. We care about blue altars here. So on this map, you're going to be running at least 40 pack size, at least 100 quantity, because you want as many items from the harvest as you can get, as much juice as you can get. Pack size also does help with juice. Besides that, just run mods that work on the regex that I provided in the written guide, and try to get as juicy of maps as you can. You are going to be using a Fruiting Astrolabe here. This is extremely important, actually, one of the more important parts of this strategy, because this item makes it so that harvest monsters have increased difficulty and reward for each completed map within the shaped region. This gives you a ton of extra juice once you get towards the end of it. We are using the strategy where you're just staying on the same map with synthesized stability, so you don't have to really worry about any of that. We're just going to be running Jungle Valley. So I'm going to go into Jungle Valley with this map, and the scarabs that we're using are going to be 2 of these scarabs of monstrous lineage. This is mainly to make it so that the altar mobs are more frequent. We want more magic monsters so that we can spawn more altars and get more quantity. Same reason that we're using Influencing Scarab of Hordes. More pack size, more quantity of those influence monsters, meaning that we get more altars. And then the 2 harvest scarabs that we're using are Cornucopia, because Additional tier 4 seeds, it's like anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 extra juice every time you get a unique mob. They can double, you can get like 3,000 per. And then on top of that, Harvest Scarab of Doubling. This just makes it so that the amount of life force they drop is doubled. And, you know, you get 100% more life. We're going to use our Harvest Tree. The Harvest Tree in particular is just going to be all of the harvest nodes. Once again, we're taking all of the nodes that give us map effect because that matters quite a bit. You can change which nodes here you take depending on what juice prices are. So right now, yellow juice is very important. So we want to get as much yellow juice as possible, meaning we're trying to get less red, less blue. Other than that, blue altars because they give the most quantity, and the rest of the points are just in things like pack size, quantity, scarabs because there's nothing else to put points into. And we're going to go ahead and jump into this map here. So once you're in here, basically your only goal is clear the map. That's the first thing that you want to do. You want to kill as many of the monsters as you can because we are trying to get altars. So these altars here are pretty dangerous a lot of the time. Essentially what you want to do when you find this altar is you just want to look at it. You want to see if it has quantity. If it does, check to make sure. Oh, Bob is dying. Is Bob going to die? Trying to keep him alive. I wasn't paying attention. Okay, you can see that as I'm giving him more life, Bob is actually surviving. Even though he had like 3 HP there for a second, he's actually making it. Okay, I think Bob is safe now. So anyways, what you're going to be doing is you're just going to be looking for this quantity. Make sure these mods don't completely destroy your build. Take quantity. If you see anything but quantity or maybe like doubling of currency, just choose the Eldritch Minions one. Like, we don't care about scarabs, so we're just going to do that. Can jump around here, and I'm just going to go through. I'm going to clear the map. I'm going to get all the altars, and then I'll see you guys in a second. So actually, here's a good example. This is a very dangerous one. Minus crit multi per power charge doesn't actually do anything to us. We don't use power charges. But projectiles are fired in random directions, can be kind of annoying, and then we have a bunch of less resistances. I don't care. I want the quantity. This build is tanky enough where those resistances won't really get me killed that often, so I just don't worry about it. One thing about mindset in softcore that I think you have to have is that occasional deaths are actually not that big of a deal as long as you're not worried about leveling anymore. Constant deaths are obviously a big deal, but an occasional death, it really genuinely doesn't matter. So we're here at the Sacred Grove. All that really matters is you just choose the one that gives you the most money. So right now it's yellow. What you should be looking at is only these bright colored ones here. The like darker gray and white, these actually don't drop almost any of the juice most of the time. It's these yellow mobs here. So we don't really care about anything else. I will choose this one just because there's more mobs at the top, but it's this one Vivid Whipleg. So harvest monsters are some of the most dangerous monsters in the game by far. You do need to respect these monsters, especially if you take a bunch of modifiers that like reduces the power of your build. These monsters can get insanely tanky, they can get insanely dangerous, and as you scale through your Atlas more, where you do more of these and increases the difficulty and reward, they can get dangerous. You need to respect them a little bit at least. But this is going to be one of the bosses. There is one particular thing that you do have to be careful about with these bosses, and that is that if you keep them too close to the walls, they will not phase. So let's go ahead and kill all the rare mobs here. Okay, the boss is out. If I pull this boss over here, it doesn't matter how much damage I do. I actually have to be careful because this can kill me. It actually doesn't matter how much damage you do if you're over here near the wall, like too close. Of course, he's going to not obey and not come close to the wall. If the boss is too close to the wall, he won't do this phase. But anyways, you just go ahead, you kill these bosses. Once you do enough damage, you'll kill them. They'll drop 1,000 to 1,500 of this life force, and then you move on. Now, in a case like this, where you see you have red versus blue, blue is worth a lot more money right now, so I'm going to go ahead and choose blue. Let's see if I can get them to actually ignore me this time and not be able to phase. Okay, let's see if this is a good enough wall. So if I get him low enough, is he going to do anything here? Yeah, so this is kind of what I'm talking about. If you keep him too close to a big wall, they're not going to be able to turn into their second version. You saw that one did, and then if I pull him away here, he should swap almost immediately. Yeah, okay. So that's the idea. That's what I was trying to show you, that if you keep him too close to any of these walls where they don't have enough room to turn into their totem, they'll just sit there and not do anything. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good example showing you that you can get like a double boss and get like almost 3,000 juice from a single plot, and then you just keep going. That's the entirety of the strategy. Now, as for the Mirage, the exact same thing applies. The Mirage is essentially just another zone, right? So we're going to be looking in here. More currency, sure, is fine. Always take like the free Barria, always take like the free like coin of skill or whatever it is. Remember that your Bob loses all of his stacks when you come in here, but you're just going to be clearing through, you're going to be getting altars again, you're going to be focusing on that, like this here. We're just going to choose minions because there's no quantity. Quantity there, we're going to take that. Just going to clear through, do the same exact thing, nothing really changes, and that's pretty much the entire strategy. And that's going to be it for the video. Thank you again to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video. Remember that if you use the link down in the description, you can get 83% off of your order as well as 4 months for free, so make sure to go check them out. And remember, boys, if you enjoy this content, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos, and stay safe out there in Rayquest. And I'll see you guys in the next video.